In emergency management, the definition of a stakeholder is any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival or recovery of a given community.
This is the Stakeholder Prepping Podcast, where the tactical comes from the practical, and today, you become your own stakeholder.
Here are your hosts, Chris and AC.
Welcome back to Stakeholder Prepping, where you, yes, you are the stakeholder in your own survival. And today we're talking about something that a lot of people say they're caring and it's very high on their list, but in actuality, very few people actually prepare for correctly. So, AC, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, we're talking about pets. We're talking about prepping with pets. And this has been an episode that a ton of people have asked us to talk about, right? Everybody's saying, "Oh, let's like do a prepping with pets episode. It'd be great if you guys talked about that because there is just so much to know." Yeah, like in an emergency, your dog or your cat or your horse or your chickens, whatever, I've got bees, you're kind of responsible for those things. And they don't really just magically become somebody else's problem. So yeah, let's talk about pets. And primarily, I think we're talking about prepping with dogs mostly. I mean, if you own a cat, you actually don't own a cat, the cat owns you. So like,
Yes.
but there are still things to prep with cats. The livestock stuff, I don't think either one of us are really an expert in livestock, but we can talk a little bit about that. Most for the most part, this is about the pets that live in your house and listen to commands. Let's say that, right?
Yeah, I am no equine expert, but I mean, I know people invest thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars into raising and caring for and training horses. I don't have that kind of, you know, throw around money, but other people
Sure.
do.
Sure.
But we are going to touch on equestrian needs. Primarily, we are looking at dogs, cats, maybe some indoor birds, things like that, that you actually can prepare for, even if you're just a novice. But we're going to cover food and water reserves, emergency recall words and control under stress, pet medicine, veterinary gaps. I mean, this is not a first aid for pets episode. That is a very important topic that can stand on its own. So we might do a part two for just the the veterinary requirements and pet medicine. And then, how pets and especially dogs can actually become assets instead of liabilities, which is a huge force multiplier when you're out in the field alone. If you've got an animal that can be your faithful companion, no time like now to start practicing that, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so this is mostly dogs, but we will, I think, touch on some other pets. This does make sense. And the biggest thing about not being prepared with your dogs is that in any kind of real life emergency, you will find immediately that pets just they magnify this logistical burden. If you are not organized, try throwing a bunch of pets at your situation and see how far less organized you are. And I notice this myself. I take my dog on the road a lot. And he's actually getting really good at staying in hotel rooms, which is kind of weird because, it's different smells and there's noises next door and all this stuff. He's getting very good at it. But man, I look pretty slick just rolling in with my 5'11" backpack and a rolling suitcase. Try and throwing a dog on a spongy leash around there. Dude, you're an idiot. So yeah, when you throw animals at any situation like this, they definitely become far more of a logistical burden. They are not a force multiplier unless you know what you're doing with pets.
Yeah, and like you said, you've got a healer mix, right?
Yeah, he's a purebred red heeler, we think, and yeah, I mean, wicked smart dog, but also a very very stubborn dog. So he's just far more stubborn and stronger than me for being 40 pounds.
Yeah, and we've got a miniature dachshund that weighs 9 pounds, 2 Australian shepherds, a male and a female, a husky who is smart but ultra stubborn, and then we've got a, guardian breed mix, and he's 120 pounds of goofball but he is incredibly smart. We actually taught him how to read so he can take his commands from a cue card. And
Ooh, that's kind of cool.
we've kind of realized, like, as a pet owner, you have to assume that that pet, if they are an adult pet, they have about the same intelligence as a 5 or 6 year old. They can figure things out. They can do reasoning. They can do basic math or language skills, and they can understand your intent, but they can't respond or reply back. So, understanding that you basically have a mute toddler running around with you all the time is a challenge, but
Right.
that's what part of prepping is. And, they need food, they need water, they need medical care, they need transportation, and most importantly, they need control. Because if you might ever find yourself bugging out to a shelter or a FEMA camp or anything like that, even if your animals are going to require minimal control equipment, oftentimes you're not even allowed into a relief shelter unless you have harnesses and muzzles for dogs and cats. They force you to put them into carriers. Having that control option is incredibly valuable if you're going to a shelter.
Yeah, and that's just such a simple, easy thing that I really didn't never even thought about because I don't own a muzzle for my dog. He's just everybody says their dog doesn't bite. I would say that too. The UPS guy would disagree, but yeah, like I don't own a muzzle for my dog. He just doesn't really have enough jaw power to really do anything anyway. But yeah, if I wanted to go to a shelter with him, regardless of how well behaved he is, they probably wouldn't let him in with some of those things. Like if I've just got the choker chain on him or a collar, they may not let him in because he's not in a harness. And I do have a harness, but I don't have a need to put it on all the time unless I'm like maybe backpacking. And then same thing with the muzzle. I don't have one. So yeah, you could find yourself in a situation where you think you've got everything and you would be precluded from some things and supplies and things like that unless you had just these very pragmatic, very inexpensive tools so you could yeah take your animals with you where you need to go.
Yeah. And unlike people, you can't really explain to your animal what's happening to them. And this is really why people get turned away from shelters, why plans fail, and why animals get abandoned. It's not because people don't care about their animals, it's because they truly didn't plan. So you have to have a key mindset shift that if you own an animal, you are now running a logistics operation. And there's no two ways about it. You have to plan for your pets if you want to get everybody, including the furry family members, out of bad news. And something that no one or almost no one plans for is actually disaster shelters requiring proof of vaccination, especially for rabies. And, you can lose a paper copy if it's a wildfire or a flood or something like that. The paper copy is in the lockbox, in the fireproof box. Great. Are you lugging 70 pounds of fireproof safe with you because it's got all of your documents? And then you've got to dig through it for 2 hours to find the most recent rabies vaccination. Your phone can die, internet is out, anything like that. But having a digital copy of a rabies certificate on a Google Drive or a Yahoo Drive or Microsoft OneDrive or something like that, a cloud storage service, or even taking a small copy of it and laminating the vaccination card and putting that into your wallet just as quick proof. Yep, here it is. We did that in the army with our basic driver's license for the military. You just print it out, take 2 pieces of clear packing tape, and that's your cheap lamination right there.
Sure, and everybody should own a laminator. Laminator's just fun. You can laminate all kinds of cool stuff. So yeah, have laminator, and they're very inexpensive now. Things like that are just super cheap. So I have a laminator I use, yeah, for like the insurance cards and things like that. But we've talked about before having all of your super important stuff backed up into some kind of digital copy, having that Go Bag USB or that solid state drive with all your stuff. But people rarely think about having all that same stuff for your dogs. I mean, of having the vaccination records backed up on that same little USB thumb drive, having the rabies certificates backed up. The microchip information is a really big one. Like all that stuff that's stored on the dog's microchip, having that, and even having maybe your vet's contact info, but having that in a digital secured backup as well as the printed copies, like you talked about, is huge because we've just talked about having all of your stuff, Chris. You've got, your license and social security cards and your DD-214 and all that backed up on that USB drive, but not having all the same stuff for all the furry family members could be a hole in your preparation plans. I even got a cool offer not too long ago from American Express, and they were like, "Hey, if you add family members, you can get like more Hilton points." So my dog has a credit card now, which they didn't ask for like social security number. It all falls back on me. So yeah, I have an Amex with my dog's name on it. Having his credit card on the USB is probably important too. But yeah, just having all of your dogs and cats information like that, like the vaccination certs and all that stuff, not just printed out and having some laminated copies laying around, but also having that on that same USB drive that we've talked about in other episodes that you've got all your stuff on.
Yeah, and that's just to gain entry into the shelter. That's not, you know, getting to the shelter with a panicked animal. That's just to be able to access it. And a lot of shelters will require dogs to be crated or muzzled or both. And I mean, if your dog has never been crated, or if your dog has never worn a muzzle, or doesn't tolerate restraint or something to that effect, doesn't like being held back, they can be denied entry and you're not getting in either. And it's not cruelty, it's logistics because a dog fight at a shelter would be disaster compounded infinitely. And so you really do have to train for it now. Get them comfortable with going in and out of their carrier or their crate. Get them comfortable with being muzzled. Get them comfortable with, the leash and harness and everything that you're going to be using that is part of your go bag. But you have to train for it while it's calm. And that's whether it's one dog or 50 cats or 500 cattle. You just have to be able to manage that logistical problem. So let's start off with one of the basics, food and water.
Yeah, and this is a pretty easy one, but I think it's just something that a lot of people don't think about, especially in a high stress environment where maybe we're being evacuated or something like that. You just won't think about those kinds of things. If you don't have water for your pets, nothing else really matters. You have to make sure that you have enough water for the pets. And let's put some real numbers to this because just sort of vague planning is kind of what would get an animal killed. Just saying, well, make sure you have water, but let's actually talk about what that means. For dogs, the safe baseline is about 1 ounce per pound of body weight per day. And in hot weather, high stress, my dog is definitely a stress drinker. I guess I am too. And in high exertion environments, things like that, that number can go up really fast. So what that means, the math says that a 50-pound dog, that's 50 ounces a day or just under 1.5 liters. So you might want to plan for like a 2-liter bottle size of fresh water for your dog per day if you're talking about a 50-pound dog. And you can't tell dogs to conserve their water either, right? That's the biggest deal. And I've noticed this doing dry camping with the dog before, where if the bowl's out and there's water in it, he's just going to go lap it up and get it everywhere and get dirt in there. And, you have to keep yourself from pouring out that slightly dirty water and filling it back up. You just got, hey man, you're just gonna have to deal with a little dirty water, and the dog's gonna be okay with that. But you need to think about those kinds of things. Now, when you multiply that by the number of dogs and number of days, and you're getting into maybe that 25 to 50% buffer, you can do the math, man. It's just a ton of water that you would need for your animals, especially for dogs, because they drink a lot.
And doing the math, when I was doing research for this, I did the math. We need 2.5 gallons of water per day just for the dogs, not to mention the gallon per day for us. So we're at
Right?
4.5 gallons per day. That's rough.
That's a ton of water. And think about that. Yeah, you and your wife are smart enough to have like the life straws, but you know what? The dog isn't going to suck through a life straw. So you just have to have You have to have a better idea of what you're going to do, especially if we start talking about filtering water for the animals. And dogs, listen, they'll drink anything. We know this, right? The dog will go down to the stream and happily drink from the stream, which is fine. But the dog can also get things like giardia, right? You don't want to be in this kind of situation. And then the dog also gets beaver fever. Man, that would just suck.
Yeah. And I always get confused between Giardia and Gardeniera, the stuff that you put on sandwiches.
No, no. One of them makes you poo, and it comes from beavers, and the other one is like Vegemite for Americans.
But yeah, this is one of those things, just do the math. And if you didn't do the math in your head while we were talking about that 1 ounce per pound per day, if you didn't do the math, that's the point. And if you can't do the math, you don't know if your plan works or not. So grab a calculator, grab your phone that you're probably listening to this podcast on anyways, bring out the calculator and do some very quick math. And for cats, cats oftentimes drink less, but that doesn't really mean they need less. Cats on dry food are chronically underhydrated, according to most vets, because they don't drink enough water to compensate for the lack of liquid that's in their food. So plan at least 5 to 7 ounces per cat per day, more if they are stressed out. And in an evacuation scenario, everybody is stressed. The animals are just going to feed off of your energy. So everybody's going to be on high alert and on edge. And that cat that you love and it loves you is going to pull out claws at some point. So for horses, we're looking at a minimum of 5 to 10 gallons per day. A lot of this depends on the size of the horse, how hard it's working, sun, heat, things like that.
That's a bunch. I had no idea that horses drink that much water. That's crazy.
Yeah, and if you own horses and don't have a water plan, you don't have horses. You have a liability that you haven't admitted yet.
Yeah, you have the first steps to making glue is what you have.
That's a good way to look at it.
You've got the basic building blocks for a glue factory. You don't have a horse anymore.
You have a moving glue factory.
You have a moving glue factory.
So let's talk about food real quick. Food is going to follow the same logic. I can tell you that ours are on a very strict feeding schedule. They get a prescribed number of scoops, which is a cup. So even our Guardian breed, he gets 2 cups each meal at 8 o'clock and 6 o'clock. But we store what they already eat. Thankfully, they're on the same foods. So I don't have to worry about, diet food for this dog and super concentrated chondroitin with MSM for this dog. They get supplements, they get fish oil pills in their dinner, they get, all sorts of treats throughout the day, but the core of their food is all the same. And we do rotate it regularly. So every time a bag runs out, we just dump a bag into the big scooping bin. But when that one is out, we rotate in the next one that we purchased and then go buy a second one. So we've always got 2 bags or 80 pounds of dog food on hand at any given time. And then don't assume that any sudden diet changes are survivable under stress. You can have cat that it's used to eating dry food and all you can give it is the wet stuff. Under stress, that could potentially make it not eat and starve to death right in front of you. And it's super important to pack and store what they already eat. So I think the actionable takeaway from this section of this episode is, if you're storing water for yourself, you should be storing at least 25 to 50% more specifically allocated for your animals, your pack. Label it, track it, don't steal from it unless you're absolutely desperate. But a starving animal is bad, a dehydrated animal is dead. So make sure that you're planning for everything. And it's not just calories.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good call. And also think about if you are stocking a bunch of food for yourselves, knowing what foods that you stock you can also feed to your animals. And I'll give you an example. My dog, it was actually the last dog that had just belly issues, kind of travel tummy stuff. The vet was like, "Oh yeah, you can do white rice, really good for the dog." Really good for a belly that's upset in a high stress environment. If your dog is, more prone to having an upset stomach, yeah, you're going to definitely end up with a dog that might be puking or having diarrhea and those kinds of things. And, if you're stocking the rice and beans, you can absolutely supplement some of the diet with that rice. And we had a 50-pound bag of white rice that just lasted forever with the dog. But yeah, if you are in a position to stock all of your food, knowing what human foods you can supplement with your animals are huge because there's some things, like I said, white rice, great, you can do that with a little bit of like chicken bouillon, really good for the dog, especially with an upset stomach. But there are some people foods that will absolutely kill your pet, and knowing which ones those are before you have a hungry pet you're just trying to keep happy is just really, really important.
Yeah. And it's super difficult to satisfy a hungry pet. You can't just, pat him on the head and say, "Nope, it's okay."
Sure. Yep.
So, let's talk about something where most pet owners fail absolutely catastrophically. So, if your dog obeys commands like sit, stay, go lay down, or we have a command kitchen that anytime we say that, they're supposed to vacate the immediate area. We say it every time we're cooking, and they vamoose. It's like a smoke grenade got
Yeah,
popped.
that's awesome. That's good to have one of those words, absolutely.
But emergency recall words and control, yeah, that that command word of kitchen, and if one of them doesn't listen to it, it is immediately increase in volume and harshness in tone. And it goes from, "All right, kitchen," to "kitchen." And they know we're serious, get out of the way. But this is really where most pet owners fail catastrophically, is because they can have their dog sit, and while everything is calm, "Yeah, I'll sit, I'll stay here. We're chilling." But then as soon as sirens, smoke, crowds, gunfire, other animals are panicking all around them, everything you thought you trained will disappear. And this is where emergency recall words can be life-saving and critical. You should have a normal recall, which for one of our dogs, it's come touch, right? So we say his name and then come touch, and that's his word to come and get some love. And then his emergency recall word, that one is a always high risk, high reward treat when he comes back. When we yell his emergency recall word, he gets specifically, and all of the dogs love it, but he gets string cheese. And we have had to use it actually recently. There was a possum in the backyard hanging out on the fence, and it was not happy that we let the dogs out. He was trained on it and fixed on it. Had to use his emergency recall to bring him off of a possum, and it worked. He got cheese, he was happy. So it is never a word that is used casually. So this should not be something that, it can't be something like TV, because every time you say, "Hey, can you turn on the TV? I'm gonna watch, so and so," then it knows that word TV. So it could be Yeti is a good word. Something that's short, easy to remember, and usually one or two syllables, not difficult to say. Because if you're knocked out of breath, you still want to be able to scream it to recall a dog, cat, horse. Cats are a little finicky on recall words, but dogs for sure. But if you make your emergency recall Yeti, then every time you're yelling that, that dog should be franking its way all the way back to you. It's not come, it's not here, it's something that's unique, and it's not really optional. It is life saving. It gives you control under stress. And can you honestly tell me, maybe AC, do you have the ability to control your healer with one hand?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, that's the thing, is he's a very smart dog. So he knows exactly what you want. It's just like you said, it's knowing that level of severity if he actually knows how important it is. And that's something that dogs obviously struggle with. So, yeah, luckily he's just not very big. So me controlling him with one hand, yeah, I can do it. But if he gets away, if he's on something, it's tough, because he really does want to go out and go after the possums and the critters and things like that. Yeah, you're right. So it is kind of tough. Luckily, I don't have a very large dog, so one hand controlling isn't that tough for me. But I couldn't imagine if you had two or three or four dogs and you're talking about 40 or 50 or 60-pound dogs. At some point, that's just more weight than you can handle yourself.
Yeah, the puppy piles are real. I
Yep.
will tell
Yeah,
you that.
100%.
I mean,
100%.
have you ever tried to muzzle your dog, or do you think that you could muzzle him if he was injured? and panicking?
Yeah, I think I probably could, but again, never had to. I don't own a muzzle. So yeah, you're exactly right. That is something I certainly have not practiced myself because I don't even own a muzzle. So I'm assuming I've been in situations like where I've had to get a tick off the dog, right? And so that is very uncomfortable for the dog. Nobody got bit, but it definitely wasn't comfortable for him. So I think I probably could get a muzzle on if he was injured, but again, something I haven't tried because I don't own a muzzle.
Well, that's got to be somewhere on your risk matrix.
Right, of course.
So we are learning together. Because I mean, if you can't control the dog one-handed, if you can't muzzle it, if you can't lift or drag, which it sounds like for the most part you obviously can, but if that answer is no, you don't have a companion, you have a liability, and you have to think of those two things in completely different limelights. For horses and livestock, how quickly can you load them? Does it take you 20 minutes to get a single horse into a trailer, or does it take 2? Can you move them without them panicking? Can you secure them if the barn or the infrastructure collapses? It's it's really training for what could happen, and training isn't about tricks and doing the cool thing. It's about control under chaos. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like I said, I don't know enough about like the livestock, like the horses and cows and things like that. My neighbors have them. I certainly would be willing to help if something happened where they had to get out quickly, but I just don't know enough about them. I can tell you with me, I would actually probably try to finagle the bees. If you can close them up in their little beehive nuck thing, as long as the queen's in there, everybody else, yeah, you're kind of okay. But
Good
I'm not,
luck.
I'm not not like putting them in the back of the car, And then obviously the chickens, man, they would just maybe they'd be on their own. I don't know. Maybe I could see how many I could get into a dog carrier or something. But yeah, the getting livestock into your livestock trailer, you've got to be prepared to do that. And you have to be able to do that quickly and efficiently without animals running off, without animals freaking out. And you've probably done it a lot. You've probably never done it when you had to do it super duper quickly. It's something to practice. It's a prep you have to practice. I think we should probably talk about some of the pet medicine and medical prepping and things like that. But we said this isn't going to be a first aid for pets episode. I think that's a very important episode. I think we should do a first aid for pets episode. We've actually consulted a couple of vets on that, but this isn't that episode. So I think this will be kind of high level. But you do have to think about the fact that in any kind of major emergency, the veterinary care is probably one of the first to fail. Like, that's just not as important as things like police and hospitals and all the other things. And vets are people too, and they don't have to come to work. So you have to think about that could break down fairly quickly. So let's talk about what you can responsibly keep on hand now. And I'll give you mine, and I'm Chris, you probably have a much longer list, but for me, my dog isn't on like any really meds or anything like that, with the exception of it's like a tick, flea, heartworm thing. I think it's called Heart Guard or something like that. But
We have something similar. Yeah, it's a once a month pill that
yeah, once a
they
month, once maybe it's Next Guard is what it's called, but it's a once a month pill, and those they've got a pretty decent shelf life on them. And I've talked to the vet about this because I like to have a bunch on hand. And so I buy them 12 at a time, a year in advance. And when I get down to 6 of them, I go buy another year. So I always have between 6 and 18 months on hand of the one medication the dog is on. But the other thing that the vet has told me, and I'm sure vets will tell you this, probably not officially because they like their kickback from NexGard or whatever, but once those medications, those tick and flea meds are in the dog's system, once they're built up in there, it's not the end of the world if you skip a month. There is usually enough stuff in there in the dog's bloodstream. So if you need to start rationing those, if you were in a long-term grid down type scenario, I'll tell you, I certainly would switch to probably every other month because my dog's been on that pill forever. And every other month, you're probably not going to have fleas and ticks and heartworm problems and things like that. So that's one that make sure you have enough on hand always. Don't wait till you are on your last pill to go, oh, I should go to the vet next month. I have mine on a rotation. So obviously it was a decent amount of money up front, But after that, it's just the normal once a month pill. So I get those 12 months at a time, and I always buy 12 whenever I'm down to 6. And that's kind of how I make sure I'm rotating out stock and always have enough if something happens where I couldn't access a vet.
Yeah. And I like what you said about veterinary care is one of the first things that drops just off the face of the planet because it really does. You're not going to be able to go fill your next guard. And ours have a couple of them are on specific medications, but we also keep on hand fish oil pills. One that keeps their coat clean and shiny, and they love the flavor. We use them as high value treats. So our husky is absolutely addicted to them, like a crack fiend from 7-Eleven. But they get fish oil pills. They get Dasequin, which is a joint health supplement. Nothing that they couldn't live without. One of them gets an allergy pill. So we've got 90-day supplies of all of those at minimum that we constantly keep on hand. But some of the other stuff that we really do keep on hand is diphenhydramine, Benadryl.
People Benadryl, you can give that to the dogs, right? As long as you know what the right dosage is for your dog's weight, right? That's a weight-based medication.
Yeah. And some dogs do react poorly. So talk with your vet about your dog. Don't try to experiment during a crisis. But stress can cause GI issues really fast. So anti-diarrheal guidance, it's going to depend animal to animal, but have something to prevent the bubble guts from ruining your shelter stay. Any critical prescription meds, 30 to 90-day buffer if it's possible. If it's something like heart meds, seizure meds, insulin, they're really non-negotiable and you should have them on hand. Insulin is a lot harder because it has to be refrigerated. So if you do have a pet that needs insulin, try to keep as much on hand as you can and rotate it out like your normal stocks. But the uncomfortable truth about all of this is an injured animal is not acting like itself. An injured animal may bite you, may kick, may scratch. Muzzles are not cruel. They are safety equipment that need to be a part of your preps.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, having a muzzle on hand, like I said, that's probably something I need to go buy now. I just don't have one because yeah, the dog doesn't bite, but that doesn't matter if the dog's not going to bite me. The dog could bite other people. The dog could bite other dogs, and in a high stress environment where you need to have your dog around a bunch of unfamiliar people and other animals, then yeah, that's something that you need to have, and you need to know how to secure one onto your animal. Now, this is where this whole mindset really matters. And we talked about this in the beginning is shifting your mindset about just how you prep with pets. But dogs, especially, they can be force multipliers if they are trained correctly. Your dog can be an important part of the group if you're doing it right, because dogs can alert early to intruders. Their ears and their nose and their eyes are just better than yours. So they can help detect abnormal behavior. Dogs can obviously track if you've trained your dog for, hunting or flushing or tracking. Your dog can be a huge force multiplier for the group. And then the dog can also provide kind of psychological stability for people under stress because they're just so cute and fuzzy. So they're a good thing to have around, but they're a great guard resource. And we've talked about this a little bit before, but man, I just don't really trust people that dogs don't like. I don't know. Like dogs are they're a good barometer for people, believe it or not.
We had a friend that the first time the dogs met him, we went camping with a mutual friend.
Hmm.
And the one shepherd just did not like him at all, would not go anywhere near him, barked every time he saw him. And we thought it was maybe the dirt bike that he was on. No, because when I was riding the dirt bike, he was completely chill with it. But
Interesting. Yeah. And then years later, like, hey, Chris, did you hear that Billy, they found like 24 people tied up in his basement? You're like, yeah, that checks out. Bailey knew the whole time.
it would, it would. That's why we don't associate with that person
Yeah,
anymore.
that checks out, man. The dog didn't like him.
Yeah, and you made a lot of really good points about alerting early to intruders, detecting that abnormal behavior, and tracking and guarding and everything that dogs and sometimes cats and horses will even guard flocks against coyotes and stuff. But they only do it if they're trained, they're fed, they're healthy, and they're under control. You have to stabilize their conditions in order for them to be able to do their job. Again, you are talking about an animal that has the intelligence of maybe a 5-year-old. So you have to stabilize their environment in order for them to be effective. If you give your 5-year-old a coloring book and a spatula and say, fill in inside the lines, they're not going to know what to do. So you really have to kind of evaluate their environment as well, because an uncontrolled dog is a noisemaker. A trained dog is an early warning system, right? And there are some little things that you can add to your preps that can become game changers for big problems before they get there. Things like dog nail clippers, right? I know you probably have what, 2, 3 sets around the house. Is there one in your go bag?
Dude, let me tell you, this is the funny thing about the dog, and I don't know if people will appreciate this or not, but my dog is trained. He knocks on the door, and he doesn't mess the door up or anything, but he's trained to knock on the door when he wants to come in. And trimming his nails has just been such a pain in the ass because I just don't want to, and it pisses him off. So what I did is I took that grip tape that you would put on stairs, and I just put it on the front of the door where he knocks, and he just trims his own nails now.
Nice.
So and it's got a little more acoustic too. So rather than just that pawing on the smooth metal door, now it makes this raking sound. So it's a little louder when he knocks. But yeah, he just trims his own nails now. At least the front ones.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's
And
just a little scratch pad.
completely non-pet related, but cool tip. So we use skateboard grip tape to improve the traction on things like high heels and dress shoes.
Sure. Yeah. Of course. Oh yeah. Right. Yeah.
And I will tell you, there are probably some bars and dance clubs and dance floors that are not happy that we ever showed up.
Just destroyed finish. Yeah. And then when they're like, "Oh, do you have non-marking athletic soles?" Yes, of course. They're just covered with cheese grater.
Pretty much.
Yeah. 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 But you're right. Being able to trim the nails, huge, right? Having the nails, because long nails can split or tear. They can get caught and stuff, and they can really mess the dog up. When I got this dog, he has double dew claws in the back. Have you seen those? They look
Mhm.
super weird. So he's got little double dews on the back ones. And I took him to the vet for the first time. He was a used dog when I got him, but I took him to the vet and I was like, "So, give him the once over, kick the tires." And the vet was like, "Is he going to be a working dog?" And I was like, "I don't know. I mean, he's going to be working, sitting on my lap a lot." Like, no. But they were like, if you were working the dog, if the dog was like a herding dog, if you're going to take him out with cattle, then they would remove one or two of those dew claws because they can cause problems. Obviously, if a cow stepped on those dew claws, then you've got a huge problem that's going to bleed a lot. So yeah, having the ability to deal with big long nails on your animal, that can be a big deal, because in a disaster, a little torn nail can turn into an infection that you just don't have the ability to treat right there.
And not only that, for stealth operations, long nails will click on hard surfaces.
Yeah. Yeah, the
And
tippy taps are everywhere for sure.
see, you call them tippy taps, we call
Yeah.
them clicky clacks.
Yeah, those things. Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. Right. Keeps you up all night.
So that brings up a good question. Dog booties, yes or no? And what are your thoughts on it?
So I can tell you I've done both. The last dog, actually, it just helped the feet from slipping apart when her little hips got bad. So I
Mhm.
did have dog booties, but I've read a lot about taking the dogs backpacking in like snow and ice and things like that. So they say that it's good for snow and ice. I take the dog backpacking and hiking in very cold temperatures. Something I have done instead of the booties is doing Vaseline on the paws, because the biggest issue with dogs is not that those paws are going to get super duper cold and be a problem, but that if you get the little fur in their paws wet, then when that freezes, it can cause a huge issue. It can expand, it can crack and all that kind of stuff. So I do the Vaseline trick on the paws, and then the water doesn't hang on to the fur and it doesn't freeze.
Interesting. See, we
Yeah.
use avocado oil mixed with beeswax, and we've got pucks that we put into small muffin containers, and we'll rub those on the paws during
Yeah,
cold weather.
same net result for the cold. Obviously, there's other environments where the booties would be a good idea. Yeah, if I was going to go hike with the dog on black asphalt for a week and a half, yeah, absolutely, I'd probably own some dog booties. But in my in my situation, I can't think any times when I would specifically need those. But yeah, if you were expecting to deal with things like debris or broken glass or ash and obviously like the snow and ice, then maybe that's a pretty good call. But your dog would have to be trained on tolerating them because the first time you put boots on a dog, if you haven't done it, you should because it's hilarious.
Yes, it is.
But yeah, they don't like it.
I think the good rule of thumb for dog booties is if you would not be willing to walk barefoot across whatever terrain it is, then the dog should be wearing booties. I think that's kind of a good way to look at it because hot asphalt or concrete, like you mentioned, the broken glass, debris, ash, snow, ice. I mean, if you don't want to be out there in bare feet, that's what you're doing to your animal is they don't have socks and shoes and everything else unless you put them on them.
Yeah, and they say, what's the rule of thumb? I think it's if you can put your hand on the asphalt and hold it there for 5 seconds, then you're probably okay, right? Isn't that's what I've heard, right? If you can't keep your hand on that asphalt for 5 seconds, then it's too hot for your pet's paw.
That's why we have to do walks in the summer at 6 o'clock in the morning because
Sure.
that's the only time that the asphalt drops below 80 degrees where we live.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Absolutely.
And
So, do you want to talk about some of the stuff for the other animals, or are we just going to do all dogs?
no, let's talk about other animals. I mean, let's talk about cats as an asset. If you have a cat, it's potentially going to be pest control, a morale booster. I mean, they're great so long as nobody's allergic to them.
Yeah, that's true. And where I am, I get a lot of our neighbors like they buy and sell cats like this commodity as barn cats. And so that might sound kind of cruel because you do have to be careful about you don't want them too reliant on you because you do want them for that pest control, but that's very common for people to have barn cats and they're nice to them. They just want them to maintain a little bit of that feralness that keeps the mice and rats at bay and things like that. And they're very effective.
Right. And then chickens, renewable protein. You can also feed them your leftovers as waste reduction.
Oh, 100%. I feed the chickens all kinds of weird stuff, and they love it. And also, the chicken poo is excellent for the garden. Having that chicken manure, very, very reusable. And I definitely am a chicken gong farmer, and it's a great thing for the garden.
Horses. So you've got transportation, labor, mobility, all without gasoline. If it's a long term grid down situation, gasoline is going to become such a high priced commodity. You might be better off having a horse.
For
And
sure.
then
Yeah.
livestock, I mean, there's your long term food security. So long as you can keep the livestock fed and watered. And that's where your logistics problems start to really compound. Because a 3,000 pound steer, I don't care if it's Wagyu or Angus or whatever, it just becomes a liability if you can't keep it fed, watered, and ready for slaughter at that point, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, if you can't protect it and feed it and control it, then you really can't keep it in kind of any kind of disaster scenario. It's just not going to work out for you. So let's talk about some of those mistakes that people always make in any kind of SHTF situation with pets.
Yeah. Um, do you want to take number one?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the biggest one is this is interesting, but loving your pets does not make you prepared. And I think a lot of people just fall back on that. I see people all the time where I will pose this question sometimes on the interwebs to people like, hey, what do you do for long-term food security for your pets? And there's kind of two schools of thought. There's people like, oh, my dog, he can just go out and eat. He's a killer or whatever. And then there's people that are like, well, if I don't eat, my dog doesn't eat, and vice versa. And okay, you can say that. They're great like diatribes to go on, but do you have a plan? Do you truly have a plan for that? Do you know what you're going to do in a SHTF situation, or are you just going to, have just a truckload of thoughts and prayers and hopes and dreams?
Right. And having no evacuation plan, no food buffer, no medical supplies, no control of the animal, that's just emotion without preparation, and it's going to lead to big problems. If that plan is figured out when it happens, that's not a plan, that's a wish.com,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, what are some things you can do? This is pretty easily, but this one is for everyone. Just people will stock a month or two worth of the kibble, but no extra water. I think this is something people do all the time as we talk about this, where you're like, yeah, I've got a gallon per day per person for everybody in my family, but you don't have that 1 ounce per day per pound for the pet that we talked about. So you just aren't prepared for the prepping with pets part.
Yeah, and actually under stress, animals tend to dehydrate faster than humans. Dehydration, I know we talked on one of our last episodes about the rule of 3.
Yep.
3 minutes without air, 3 days without
Days without
water.
water. Yep.
Think about that, and animals dehydrate even faster. So you may only have 2 days or a day and a half. And if you don't have dedicated water for your pets that's labeled, measured, accounted for, I mean, you're already behind on that scale. It's not implied, it's assigned, right?
Yeah, that's a really good one. And then obviously, like the recall word stuff you talked about. I don't know, Chris, if you want to talk at all about the training you've done or how you did that. Did you take your dogs somewhere, professional to be trained? Did you ship them off to one of those places where they just reprogram them and send you a different dog back? Or like what did you do to get your dogs to actually listen in high stress situations to your recall words?
We did not Jason Bourne any of our dogs, but
I have seen people do that. Like there's the dog services. You send them out like your hunting dog. And you're like, hey, I got a new yellow lab, and you ship them off, and you're like, you get a different dog back.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, you very much do. We actually went through PetSmart. We went to
Hmm.
the classes. It was, I think, 8 weeks on Saturdays that we took our most recently, our youngest dog as the guardian breed. So we took him. He was the biggest dog in the class, and he's just a gentle giant until he wants to play. But you can do it at home if you have somebody else hold the dog, and then you go someplace where they cannot see you and call their name and then call their emergency recall word. So this dog in particular, we were in PetSmart, and then we both belted out his emergency recall word and got everybody in the aisles at PetSmart to look at us. And then the instructor for the class just let the leash go because she was not holding on to him. Not that dog, but let him go. He found us and was super excited. He got a whole stick of mozzarella cheese as a reward, and that cemented it. So we tried it 2 or 3 more times, and yeah, it still works.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Some other big common mistakes. Obviously, the whole first aid and medication thing. I think we beat that to death, and we are going to do an entire episode just on the first aid for pets. So that's definitely something you have to have, and that's kind of pet specific sometimes. The other one is just never testing the transport or evacuation with the pet, never actually practicing that prep. You may be prepared with the rest of the family to like, hey, when we say go, grab your bags and get in the car, but you may have never practiced that with your pet. Is this the first time that your dog has been in a dog carrier? Or is this the first time you've put this dog in this particular dog carrier and you just don't know the nuances of that particular carrier? So this is something that shouldn't be done for the first time when the back 40 of your property's on fire and you've got to go.
Yeah, Absolutely. I could not imagine the shape that my back muscles would be in if I had to load that guardian breed into the car every time because he didn't know how to jump up. I would
Sure.
I would have so many hernias, it would be stupid.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something you definitely do have to teach them. But yeah, getting the pets into the carriers, knowing how to load the horses quickly under stress, those kinds of things, and
All
then
without getting stepped on.
yeah, without getting stepped on, without getting anybody hurt, without getting the animals hurt. Yeah, it's just a bunch of stuff you have to practice for now. Another big one is people just simply treating their pets only as emotional support. I see this a lot because I fly a lot and I just see just these total douche rockets with their little, emotional support dogs that all they did, they just bottom the vest and the label and they don't know how to control their dogs and they treat them as if they are a decoration or accessory. And your pets are mouths to feed. They are noise sources. They are security risks, or they could be force multipliers. They could be good for the group. They could have their own job within the group. So having your animal, and I'll tell you this about many dog breeds, is if you don't give them a job, they will give themselves a job.
And that job frequently becomes destruction of the couch.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's see how quick I can turn this coffee table into sawdust. I mean, if you don't give them a job, they will give themselves a job. So making sure that the pets know what their job is. And if it's their day job, then it's going to be the same job they have in an emergency situation.
Yep. It's just going to work. I think the last mistake that a lot of people make is they don't have a hard line on what they can sustain with pets. I mean, and this is really the one that nobody wants to talk about because if resources become limited, you have to know which animals you can sustain for how long at what cost. This is your logistics puzzle. And you really should be making the decisions now and using something like the Mad Gear contingency planner to plot all of this out because I mean keeping animals that you can't feed, water or protect, it doesn't make you compassionate. It kind of makes the situation tenfold worse. And preparation isn't about saving everything, it's about making survivable choices. So you really have to make this decision when you're not under stress and it's a very very difficult one to process your way through, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and writing it out. That's what Mad Gear's great for, man. Just put pen to paper and it's just going to make a lot more sense. So let's talk about real quick. We'll speed round this thing out. But what do you need to have the kind of go bag for the pets? What do we need? For food, we talked about this, right? Minimum 3 to 7 days. I mean, obviously that can be longer depending on what kind of situation you find yourself in, but stored in sealed, waterproof containers. I think a lot of people don't realize that that sort of slick plastic mylar bag they buy from the grocery store is not actually waterproof. If you got rained on, if you throw that on in the rack on the top of the Subaru, that kibble is going to be worthless. So having sealed waterproof containers for the pet food, huge one. If you're talking about canned food, man, having a can opener, we talk about this, the P38 or P51, have a can opener. That's huge. And then remembering the feeding instructions. If you've got the little chart written down of what animal gets how much food or how much food they actually need, if you're trying to keep a reserve of that and you're trying to ration food a little bit, knowing how much the animal actually needs, that's very important if we're starting to talk about rationing food to the animals.
Yeah, absolutely. And then adding on water, an ounce per pound of dog per day, 5 to 7 ounces per day for cats, 5 to 10 gallons per day for horses. Having something like collapsible bowls and clearly labeled pet only water in your go bag is going to be critical. So let's move on to medications and first aid. You obviously want a 30 to 90 day supply of any prescription meds and vet approved Benadryl, maybe some antidiarrheals, and keep them up to date on their flea, tick, and heartworm prevention. It's super easy, and they're flavored tablets. The dogs love to eat them. Just keep up on that because You don't want to put your dog through that. But actually, electrolytes. You need to make sure that you also either have some of your 10 pounds of salt that you are willing to share with the dog just to keep their electrolytes up. And AC, do you want to talk about like first aid kit for go bag?
I think we should probably save that for another episode because first aid is so insanely important. I don't want to just gloss over that. I think we should save that for another episode.
That works. Let's move on to kind of that control and transport. You need a leash, collar with ID, harness, and a crate. Familiar blanket or bedding is going to help to calm an animal, but make sure you have your documentation like rabies and vaccination records, microchip number, vet contact info, photo of you with your pet for proof of ownership, which is
Yeah.
weird.
People can steal pets, and that happens. And absolutely, if you get a bunch of people you don't know in some kind of shelter or camp situation, and you've got that little $5,000 Shiba Inu, man, might want to turn that into 30 carbon and gold bullion.
You should also keep, I really like that. I can't stop laughing.
They're going to turn that Shiba Inu into Shiba Inu coin. Turn that thing into crypto. So yes, having a picture of you with your dogs can prove it's your dog. That's kind of a big deal.
That would be a great name for a Shiba. Crypto.
What's that? Crypto. Yeah, a little Shiba. Yeah, absolutely it would. Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Some of the other things that you should probably keep in your animal go bag are like nail clippers, a grooming tool like a brush, towels, not just for drying, but also for warmth, cleanup, comfort, waste bags, cleaning wipes. If you do have dogs, booties, if they're trained on them, cooling vest or an insulating coat, depending on their coat length, and a long line leash so that you can control them at a distance. For cats, you definitely want to carry extra litter and a carrier. And then horses, you need the halter, you need the lead, spare shoes, feed scoop, a portable water container, a trailer readiness plan. All of that's going to come down to how you and your horses work together. So, final reality check as we are running down on the hour. Ask yourself, can I carry or control this animal under stress? Can I feed and water them for at least 72 hours? Can I prove ownership and vaccination status? And can I secure them safely around others? And if any one of those is no, try fixing it now before it becomes a problem.
Right, and I'll throw two more at you. One is the tether. I bought one of these recently just for camping, where it's just like this little corkscrew thing you put in the ground, and then you can attach a lead to it or the dog's leash, and you can make that as long or short as you need to by maybe adding some 550 cord or whatever you have. But yeah, if you're in a situation where maybe you're in a tent or you're just in the car and you're trying to secure the dog outside, dogs can quickly wrap themselves up around things and they can also take off with things like your tent. So having one of these screw into the ground tether things, they're set up so the lead sort of moves freely on like a carabiner around them so the dog can't wind themselves up around them. That's a very valuable tool to have if you're going to be outside in an area where you don't want the dog to take off. The dog needs to be able to be outside on their own. And the other thing is the dog tags. My dog tag, not only does it have my phone number and the dog's name, but it also says on it that the dog is microchipped. And that way, if you're in a situation where they can't get a hold of you, where your phone is dead, or maybe I travel overseas a lot and maybe the call just doesn't go through, the person that does find your animal can know that if they get your animal to a vet or someone who can scan that dog's microchip, that there is a microchip in that pet. So I actually say that on the dog's little tag. It says microchipped below my phone number.
That's a really good idea. I'm going to have to get all new tags for the
Yeah,
5 dogs that we
sorry about
have.
that. Yeah, it just cost you like $30, but yeah, that's just a big one for me because you've got the phone number on it. But then if there's a problem with your phone or you lost your phone, then at least they will know, hey, if I can get this dog somewhere where they can scan a microchip, now we know who this person is. We know We know where this person lives, all that kind of stuff. So it's just if you're in a situation where your animal can get away from you, it's just people will know that, okay, I know I can get this dog back even if that phone number doesn't work.
Yeah, and I know some of the newer rabies tags actually have QR codes on them, so you can
You're
scan
right.
them, see the
Yep.
vaccination status and the contact information. That's what all of ours have.
Yep. All right. Well,
So,
so should we, anything else before we wrap this one up?
no, I think this has been kind of one of those action-packed episodes, but not any action.
Right.
This is a very dense episode to try to get it into an hour time
Of
block. So
course. Of course.
I think we're probably done. But if you found this episode useful, share it with someone who owns a dog or a cat and thinks they're prepared but hasn't tested it. That is kind of your prepper homework for this week. Come back next week. We are going in a completely different direction, and I think we're going to have fun with this one because it's something that a lot of people think they know a lot about, but they actually don't. We're going to be talking
Yeah.
about gray men.
Yeah, we're gonna get kind of James Bondy on you and talk about some of the some things that both Chris and I have learned in the field, in the real world, and some other research we've done. So I'm actually excited to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. But as always, remember you are the stakeholder in your own survival. Come back next week and we will see you then.